Thank you for being here. I mean that. My name is Michael Pozesny, but most people call me Mental Mike. I'm a certified international alcohol and drug counselor, and I've spent the last 40 years working in the trenches of addiction recovery, not from an office with leather chairs and diplomas on the wall, but in jails, treatment centers, probation departments, and the front lines where people are actually fighting for their lives. I've worked with thousands of individuals struggling with substance abuse. I've been a state law enforcement trainer, a probation director, a domestic violence specialist, a trauma counseling facilitator, and a university professor teaching hundreds of courses over 20 years. I hold graduate degrees in psychology, criminal justice, public safety, and adult education. But none of that is why I created the Unified Flux Model. I created it because I kept seeing the same thing. Traditional recovery approaches were missing something essential. People were being told they were powerless, that they had a disease they'd battle forever, that their only hope was to white-knuckle through cravings for the rest of their lives. And it wasn't working. Not really, not for most people. The Unified Flux Model is different. It treats you like the intelligent, capable person you are. It integrates neuroscience, energy dynamics, behavioral psychology, and 40 years of real-world experience into a framework that actually respects your mind and your struggle. You're not diseased. You're disconnected. And disconnection can be reversed. This is my first podcast in what I hope will be a long journey together. My goal is simple: to help as many people as possible understand what's actually happening in their brains and bodies during addiction, and what they can do to transform it. I've built an entire ecosystem to support you. 1. The Soul Recovery Hub at soulrecoveryhub.learnworlds.com is our online learning platform. It's still under construction, but it's where you'll find a comprehensive recovery curriculum, coaching programs, and resources designed around the Unified Flux Model. 2. Recovery Radio is the world's first 24/7 streaming station, playing hundreds of original songs I've created exclusively for people in recovery. No triggers, no songs glorifying the life that almost killed you. Just music that understands your journey. 3. The Mental Mike Recovery Hub hosts a growing library of podcasts for clients, counselors, and professionals, along with audiobooks that go deeper into the science and practice of sustainable recovery. 4. We just launched Mental Mike Recovery on YouTube, where you'll find these podcasts in video format, along with visual breathing guides and real client stories that show transformation is possible. 5. And as of today, we've gone live with Soul Recovery Coffee and Tea at soulrecoverycoffeeandtea.com. Quality coffee and tea blends created specifically for the recovery community. Because sometimes the small rituals matter. Sometimes a good cup of coffee is part of rebuilding your life. Why am I doing all of this? Because you deserve better than outdated models that strip you of agency. You deserve to understand what's happening in your brain when you crave, why willpower alone fails, and how to build new patterns that actually stick. You deserve a recovery approach that treats you with respect and gives you real tools, not just slogans. In this podcast, I'm going to explain the Unified Flux Model in detail. I'll break down how addiction forms, why traditional approaches often fall short, and what it actually takes to rewire your brain and reclaim your life. I sincerely hope you'll give us a try. Subscribe to the podcast, check out the Soul Recovery Hub, stream Recovery Radio when the nights get long, connect with us on YouTube, grab a cup of coffee from Soul Recovery, and settle in for the work ahead. This isn't just another recovery program. This is a movement built on science, experience, and the belief that you are capable of more than survival. You're capable of transformation. Thank you so much for listening. Let's get started. Acknowledging our borrowed state. We admit we are temporary stewards of borrowed molecules living on borrowed time, powerless over destructive patterns, and that our lives have become disconnected from the transformative balance of the unified flux. Introduction to Borrowed Molecules and Time. The phrase borrowed molecules living on borrowed time encapsulates the profound truth that life itself is transient, and the resources, our bodies, minds, and the moments we occupy, are not truly ours, but part of a larger system of interconnected existence. For those struggling with addiction, this concept provides a transformative perspective. It reframes life not as an individual possession, but as a sacred trust, offering the potential to rebuild purpose and connection. Addiction often roots itself in a disconnection from this truth. It replaces the natural rhythm of life with a destructive cycle of compulsion and loss of control. The first step of the Unified Flux philosophy, acknowledging our borrowed state, is not merely an admission of powerlessness. It is a recognition of the sacred interconnectedness of existence and an invitation to restore balance and meaning. Understanding the concept of borrowed molecules. From a scientific perspective, human beings are literally made of borrowed molecules. The carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and other elements in our bodies were formed in the cores of stars billions of years ago. These molecules are continuously exchanged with our environment, through the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we consume. This ongoing exchange underscores our relationship with the natural world and reinforces the idea that we are stewards of resources, not owners. Addiction disrupts this stewardship. Substance abuse alters the body's neurochemistry, hijacking natural processes and prioritizing temporary gratification over long-term health and balance. Research shows that addictive substances like alcohol, opioids, and stimulants manipulate neurotransmitters, creating cycles of dependency that deplete the body's borrowed resources. Recognizing this disruption is the first step toward reclaiming the balance inherent in the unified flux. Powerlessness as the doorway to empowerment. Admitting powerlessness is not a statement of defeat, but a courageous acknowledgement of the limitations of individual control. This idea parallels concepts in traditional recovery programs, such as the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous, which states, "We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable." However, the Unified Flux philosophy expands on this by framing powerlessness as part of a larger dynamic flow. By recognizing that we are stewards, not controllers of our lives and resources, we open ourselves to the transformative balance of unified flux. This perspective aligns with research suggesting that surrendering the illusion of control can reduce stress and improve outcomes in addiction recovery. The goal is not to give up entirely, but to shift from isolated self-reliance to interconnected reliance on a greater system of support and balance. Disconnection and the role of addiction. Disconnection is at the heart of addiction. Johann Hari famously asserted that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection. Addiction thrives in isolation, disconnection from self, others, and the broader flow of life. The Unified Flux philosophy addresses this by framing disconnection as a disruption in the natural, transformative flow of existence. When you view yourself as separate from the unified flux, you may feel alienated, purposeless, and overwhelmed. This alienation often drives the cycle of addiction, as substances become a substitute for the connection and meaning that are missing. Recognizing this disconnection is a critical step in recovery. It invites you to see yourself not as an isolated being, but as an integral part of a larger dynamic whole. Unified Flux, a path to transformation restoring balance. Unified Flux emphasizes that life operates within a balance of giving and receiving, action and reflection, growth and stillness. Addiction disrupts this balance by prioritizing immediate gratification over the long-term harmony of the mind, body, and spirit. Recovery involves restoring this balance through intentional practices, such as mindfulness, healthy relationships, and spiritual reflection. Research supports this approach. For example, mindfulness-based interventions have been shown to reduce cravings and improve emotional regulation in individuals with substance use disorders. By cultivating awareness of the present moment, you can reconnect with the flow of life and recognize your role as steward of your resources. Embracing temporality. Acknowledging that we live on borrowed time is a powerful motivator for change. The fleeting nature of life reminds us of its value and the urgency of aligning our actions with our higher purpose. This perspective is supported by existential psychology, which emphasizes that recognizing life's brevity can inspire individuals to live more authentically and meaningfully. For those in recovery, this means shifting focus from short-term pleasures to long-term fulfillment. It involves prioritizing actions that contribute to personal growth, meaningful relationships, and spiritual alignment with the unified flux. It gives you a reason to change. Stewardship as empowerment. Viewing life as a trust rather than a possession reframes recovery as an act of stewardship. This mindset shifts the focus from self-centered desires to a broader perspective of responsibility and connection. It aligns with spiritual principles found in many traditions, including Christianity, which teaches that life is a gift from God to be cared for and used for good purposes. In practice, this means making choices that honor the borrowed nature of our bodies and lives, choosing health over harm, connection over isolation, and purpose over chaos. Empowerment comes not from controlling life, but from aligning with its natural flow and purpose. For individuals with addiction, adopting the unified flux philosophy requires more than intellectual understanding. It requires emotional resonance. Here's how this philosophy can speak to the hearts and minds of those in recovery. Empathy and universality. The concept of borrowed molecules emphasizes that we are all part of the same interconnected system. This universality fosters empathy, breaking down barriers of shame and isolation that often accompany addiction. By recognizing your shared humanity with others, you feel less alone in your struggles. Hope through connection. Unified Flux offers hope by reframing addiction not as a personal failing, but as a disruption in the natural flow of life. This shift empowers you to see recovery as a process of reconnection and renewal, rather than punishment or deprivation. Purpose and meaning. Acknowledging borrowed time and resources invites you to live with intention and purpose. For many, addiction fills a void left by a lack of meaning. Unified Flux provides a framework for you to rediscover that meaning through alignment with life's natural rhythms and higher purposes. Practical guidance. Unified Flux integrates spiritual and scientific principles into actionable steps, such as mindfulness practices, community engagement, and self-reflection. These tools provide tangible pathways for individuals to restore balance and reconnect with the transformative flow of life. Acknowledging our borrowed state is the first and most vital step in the Unified Flux philosophy. It invites you to confront the reality of your disconnection while offering a path to reconnection and transformation. By recognizing that we are stewards of borrowed molecules living on borrowed time, we shift from a mindset of control to one of responsibility, humility, and purpose. For those in recovery, this perspective is both liberating and empowering. It reframes addiction as a disruption in the natural flow of life, and recovery as a journey toward balance and harmony within the unified flux. Through this step, you can begin to reconnect with yourself, others, and the broader dynamic system of existence that sustains us all. I want you to hear from two people who've been studying this framework and breaking it down in ways that might resonate differently from my clinical explanations. What you're about to hear is a conversation by an AI tool that analyzes the material I've created and discusses it in a natural conversational format. Think of it as two people sitting down to unpack what I just told you, exploring the ideas from different angles. They will interpret the core concepts and then dig deeper into the model itself. Here's that conversation.
Usually when we talk about ownership, there's this expectation of absolute undeniable permanence, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Like you pay off the mortgage, you hold the deed to the house in your hand, and you can point to that physical structure and say, that is mine.
Right. It gives you that sense of grounding.
Exactly. We just love the idea of possessing things, especially our own lives, our own bodies, our own time.
Of course we do. It's human nature.
But then you step into the world of quantum physics and deep human recovery, and suddenly that title deed you thought you had, it just completely dissolves.
It really does. It just vanishes.
Right. So today we are taking a deep dive into the Unified Flux Model, or UFM. And we're drawing from two really fascinating texts for this.
Yeah, the Unified Flux Model, Mental Mike's Guide to Recovery, and Unified Flux, The Path of Sacred Stewardship.
And what we're going to see is how this model takes quantum physics, neuroscience, and spirituality.
Yeah.
And kind of forces you to realize that not actually owning your life might just be the most empowering tool for human recovery you can ever learn.
I mean, it is a radical reframing, especially for anyone navigating the really difficult waters of recovery, or, anyone just feeling deeply disconnected from their own life.
Yeah, because normally, how do we treat human struggle?
Well, historically, it's almost always broken down into these isolated silos. Like, you go to a medical doctor for the biology, right? And they just look at the neurochemistry of your brain.
It's the physical stuff.
Exactly. And then you go to a therapist for the psychology side. So they look at your trauma, your childhood, your behavior.
Right.
And then maybe, you go to a spiritual leader for the existential crisis part of it.
Right.
We end up treating the human experience as this series of disconnected symptoms.
And the architect behind this Unified Flux Model, a guy known as Mental Mike, he essentially saw the total failure in that siloed approach.
Yeah, she really did.
And when you look at his background, it starts to make sense why he decided to, build a bridge between these completely different worlds.
Oh, his background is wild.
It really is. I mean, we are talking about someone with over 30 years of experience in substance abuse and violence prevention, working directly in the trenches of the criminal justice system.
And the education on top of that is just staggering.
4 master's degrees, right?
Yeah. Criminal justice, public safety, adult education, and psychology, plus over 20 years as a college educator.
Oh, and don't forget the 37 different certifications, including his credential as an international alcohol and drug counselor.
Right.
It's honestly like looking at the ultimate Swiss Army knife of human services.
That's a great way to put it. Because he brings this highly unique synthesis of disciplines to the table. He isn't just, some academic theorizing from a safe distance.
Well, he's actually been there.
Exactly. He spent decades watching people fall through the cracks of those traditional isolated treatment models. So what he recognized is that addiction, or just profound despair, isn't just a biological glitch. And it isn't just a psychological wound either. It's a systemic disconnection.
A disconnection from everything.
Right. So by using the fundamental mechanics of the universe, like the literal laws of energy and matter, he provides a framework that explains the entirety of the human experience.
Okay, I understand the ambition there. But looking at his resume, kind of have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Sure, go for it.
It's one thing to have a mountain of degrees and all this frontline experience. But how on earth do quantum physics and energy dynamics naturally intersect with something as grounded, gritty, and desperate as addiction counseling?
It does sound like a stretch at first, I'll admit.
Right. Like, how do you bring astrophysics into a recovery circle without sounding like you're just writing pure science fiction?
Well, you start by looking at the absolute bedrock of the UFM framework, which is their first step. The text uses a very specific, carefully chosen phrase. It says we need to acknowledge our borrowed state.
A borrowed state.
Yes, it states that we are, quote, temporary stewards of borrowed molecules living on borrowed time.
Wow. Okay, that's heavy.
It is. And this is not just some poetic metaphor to make people feel a sense of wonder. It is grounded in hard, undeniable astrophysics.
Wait, really? How so?
So when scientists began mapping the origins of the elements back in the mid-20th century, they proved definitively that the heavy elements making up your body right now, I mean the carbon in your cells, the iron in your blood,
The oxygen in your lungs?
exactly. All of it was forged in the agonizing pressure of dying stars billions of years ago.
That is just, it's mind-blowing. So we are quite literally walking, talking, temporary configurations of ancient stardust.
We really are, but the science goes even deeper than just that origin story. We aren't just a static collection of those old star molecules.
Right, because we're constantly changing.
Exactly. There is a continuous physical exchange happening every single second. You breathe in oxygen that a tree just expelled.
Yeah.
You drink water that has cycled through the atmosphere for millennia.
You eat food grown from the soil?
Right. Your cells are constantly regenerating, dying off, and being replaced by new molecules from your environment. So you are not a permanent object. You are a biological process.
A temporary vessel for these elements.
Yes, exactly. And the existential psychology tied into this model relies heavily on that physical reality.
Okay, I think I see where this is going.
Yeah, think about the pressure that comes with feeling like you have to control and permanently possess every aspect of your life.
Oh man, the pressure is huge.
It is. When you view yourself as the sole owner of your life, the cultural expectation is that you must be the master of your destiny. You have to fiercely hoard your time, your resources, your body.
And when that property gets damaged, right, like through addiction or failure or just illness,
Right.
it feels like an isolated, crushing defeat. You are just completely alone on an island with a ruined asset.
That's exactly it.
Okay, I get the physics, and I definitely understand the philosophy of shifting away from ownership. But on a human level, this sounds kind of terrifying.
How do you mean?
Well, if I am sitting here listening to this, and I'm already struggling, like maybe I'm losing my job, my relationships are falling apart, my health is failing.
Yeah.
And now you tell me I don't even own my own body or my own time. How does making me feel even smaller and stripping away whatever little ownership I thought I had left actually help me recover?
That's a really fair question.
Yeah.
But it helps because it lifts the crushing psychological burden of solitary isolation.
Okay.
The UFM shifts the paradigm from ownership to stewardship. Think about taking care of a beautiful, sprawling estate that you do not hold the deed to.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Right. Your job isn't to own the land. Your job is simply to tend the garden today. By removing the illusion of ownership, you realize you are part of a sacred trust.
But you aren't losing your value by being small.
Not at all. You are recognizing your immense value as an interconnected, vital piece of the cosmos. The universe has entrusted you with these ancient molecules for a very brief window of time. For someone in recovery, this completely rewrites the narrative. Your life is no longer an individual possession you have permanently ruined. It is a sacred trust that you now have the daily opportunity to care for.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But if we accept that humans are naturally just this one tiny interconnected part of a beautiful, continuous cosmic exchange of energy and molecules, how does the UFM explain addiction?
Because clearly something goes wrong.
Right. When a substance takes over a life, that natural sacred flow gets severely interrupted.
Oh, it doesn't just get interrupted. It gets completely hijacked and derailed. The UFM defines addiction fundamentally as a severe disruption of stewardship.
A disruption of stewardship, got it.
To really grasp this, we have to look at the mechanics of the brain's reward system. Naturally, our brains are wired to give us a gentle hum of dopamine when we do things that promote our survival and our connection to the world.
Like eating a good meal or hugging someone you love.
Yeah, or learning a new skill.
Yeah.
That dopamine is just the brain's way of saying, this is good, keep doing this, stay connected.
But when a substance enters the body, that subtle, natural reward system gets blown out of the water.
Completely blown out of the water.
Yeah.
A highly addictive substance floods the brain's reward center with synthetic dopamine at levels that nature never intended.
So the brain just gets overwhelmed.
Totally. Suddenly, the brain stops recognizing those subtle, natural rewards of human connection or taking care of your health. It thinks it has found the ultimate supreme survival tool.
Which is the substance.
Yes. And because the brain is highly adaptable, it actually rewires your neural pathways to prioritize that substance above absolutely everything else.
Oh, wow. So it's a physical rewiring.
Yes. It aggressively prunes away the pathways that care about family or your career or even self-preservation. It is literally short-circuiting your ability to care for your own molecules.
You are taking the sacred trust of those borrowed molecules and essentially setting them on fire for cheap, immediate fuel.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
It really brings to mind that famous assertion made by journalists and researchers studying human connection, that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Exactly. Johann Hari's work touches on that beautifully. And the UFM texts emphasize the exact same thing. Addiction thrives in dark, isolated corners. It thrives when you are alienated from this unified flux.
Right. And the behavioral symptoms of addiction perfectly mirror that neurochemical hijacking, don't they?
They absolutely do. When the brain prioritizes the substance, it forces the individual into behavioral isolation. You start hiding the addiction. You pull away from the people who love you.
You stop taking care of your physical health.
Yeah. You are quite literally unplugging yourself from the flow of life. You view yourself as separate from the unified flux. You see yourself as an isolated owner of a failing system rather than an interconnected steward.
And when that alienation sets in, you just feel profoundly purposeless.
And then the substance becomes a very destructive, very poor substitute for the meaning that comes from natural connection.
So if we follow this logic, it completely changes the villain of the story we tell ourselves about human struggle.
It flips it on its head.
Right. The substance itself, the alcohol, the drug, whatever the destructive behavior is almost secondary. The core issue is that addiction is a physiological and spiritual short circuit in the universal flow.
Exactly.
And if you are essentially unplugged from the cosmic grid, then recovery isn't about locking yourself in an empty room and relying on brute force willpower to fight the substance.
No, not at all.
It has to be about actively forcing yourself to plug back in, to people, to nature, to a daily routine.
And that realization is exactly where the UFM introduces its completely redefined concept of powerlessness.
Okay, let's talk about powerlessness.
Yeah.
Because that's a loaded word.
It really is. But think about it, if your neural wiring has been chemically hijacked to prioritize a substance, trying to just muscle through it with willpower is biologically and mathematically impossible.
Right, your brain is working against you.
Exactly. So the UFM requires you to admit powerlessness over that short circuit, which is a concept anyone familiar with traditional recovery circles like Alcoholics Anonymous will immediately recognize.
Oh, sure. AA's step 1 is admitting powerlessness over alcohol and that our lives have become unmanageable.
Right. And UFM's step 1 is acknowledging the borrowed state, admitting powerlessness over destructive patterns, and recognizing the disconnection from the unified flux.
But wait, let me push back on this a bit. Because we live in a modern culture that constantly screams at us to take control of your destiny or manifest your reality.
Oh, everywhere you look. Be the master of your own universe.
Exactly. We are deeply conditioned to view surrender as the ultimate weakness. Isn't surrendering control incredibly difficult for people to swallow?
It is entirely countercultural, and that is exactly why it is the linchpin for actual transformation.
Really?
Yes. The resistance to surrender comes from a total misunderstanding of what control actually is. Think of it like being caught in a powerful rip current in the ocean. If you believe you must master the ocean, you will try to swim directly against that current. You'll use every single ounce of your energy trying to conquer it.
And eventually you just drown from sheer exhaustion.
Exactly. That is what trying to control an addiction with sheer willpower looks like. Admitting powerlessness in the UFM isn't throwing your hands up in despair and letting the ocean drag you under.
It's not giving up.
No. It is acknowledging the reality of the physics around you. You surrender your need to conquer the ocean, and instead you swim parallel to the shore. You let the current carry you until you find a place where the water breaks and you can safely stand.
Oh man, that is such a good analogy. So true empowerment in this model doesn't come from forcing control over things you can't dictate.
Exactly.
It comes from aligning with the natural physics of the universe. You are empowered to make choices within the flow as a steward, rather than trying to be the dictator of the river.
Right. The illusion of absolute control is psychologically exhausting. Research into recovery outcomes consistently shows that when individuals surrender the illusion that they can perfectly manage their environment, their internal stress levels just plummet.
And their recovery success improves.
Significantly improves. It shifts you from fragile, isolated self-reliance to an interconnected reliance on a much greater system.
Okay, let's bring this down to the everyday practical level.
Sure.
If I accept that I am an interconnected steward made of ancient stardust,
Yeah.
and I understand that addiction or despair is a short circuit of my neurochemistry, how do I actually apply this?
Like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. How do you wake up on a Tuesday morning and actively fix a short circuit?
Well, the UFM provides highly pragmatic, actionable tools to maintain that connection, and one of the primary methods is mindfulness.
Mindfulness. Okay.
Now, I know mindfulness is often misunderstood simply as a relaxation technique, just deep breathing and chilling out.
Right, like sitting cross-legged on a yoga mat.
Exactly. But neurologically, when you practice mindfulness, you are actually strengthening the prefrontal cortex of your brain, which is your logic and reasoning center. It's essentially your brain's brake pedal.
Oh, that makes sense.
By strengthening that area, you give your brain the ability to override the panic response and the intense cravings generated by the more primitive, hijacked areas of the brain.
So it's like a workout for your brain's brakes.
Yes. Clinical studies actually show that mindfulness-based interventions physically weaken the neural pathways associated with substance cravings.
Because it anchors you in the present moment. It stops you from ruminating on the past you can't change, or panicking about a future you can't predict.
Exactly.
But in the specific context of the Unified Flux Model, mindfulness isn't just about closing your eyes and listening to a meditation app to lower your blood pressure.
No, it becomes an active, daily practice of observing your connection to the grid. It is the practice of consciously remembering your role as a steward.
It is actively remembering your job. Remembering that the atoms in your lungs and the blood in your veins are borrowed materials, and you have a daily sacred responsibility to care for them.
And that active stewardship naturally bridges into the spiritual alignment of the UFM. Mental Mike designed this framework so that regardless of your specific faith background, the core tenets really resonate.
Right, it's very universal.
It is. For example, the text points to traditions like the Christian scripture in 1 Corinthians, which views the physical body as a temple and life as a divine gift meant to be cared for rather than abused.
Yeah.
So whether you view that gift through the lens of a specific religion or through the awe of quantum physics, the mandate remains identical. Your life is a trust. You are the caretaker.
And there is such massive emotional relief in that perspective.
Yeah.
Because if we're all fundamentally constructed from the exact same borrowed stardust,
Which we are.
continuously exchanging the exact same molecules in the atmosphere with every breath we take, the undeniable universality of that reality completely shatters the isolation of shame.
Oh, absolutely. Because shame relies entirely on the belief that you are uniquely broken, that you're completely alone and entirely separate from everyone else.
But when you understand the physics of our shared molecules, it just forces profound empathy. You realize that you and the person struggling next to you are quite literally part of the same continuous living system.
The walls of alienation simply cannot stand up to the reality of biology. It offers immense hope by reframing addiction.
It's no longer a dirty personal failing.
No, or a permanent moral weakness. It is merely a severe disruption in nature, and it frames the process of recovery not as a lifelong punishment of deprivation and restriction,
But as a joyful, purposeful journey of plugging back into the universe.
Exactly.
It really is a complete fundamental paradigm shift.
Right.
We have covered a vast amount of ground today, and it is incredible to see how Mental Mike took his 30 years of frontline, gritty experience in the criminal justice system.
And combined it with his extensive academic background.
Right. And wove it into a philosophy this cohesive. I mean, we started with the astrophysics of the mid-20th century, unpacking the reality that our bodies are functioning as temporary vessels for ancient stardust.
Yeah.
We broke down the mechanics of the addicted brain, seeing exactly how a substance floods the reward center and creates a physiological short circuit that unplugs us from the cosmic grid.
And then we explored how the cultural obsession with isolated control actually drives us deeper into exhaustion.
Yeah, the rip current.
Right. And how redefining powerlessness, learning to swim parallel to the rip current rather than fighting it, is the key to reducing stress and embracing true stewardship.
It is a framework that doesn't just hand you a clinical list of how to recover. It provides a profound, universally grounded reason why you should.
Exactly.
And for anyone listening who feels that resonance, who really wants to explore the deep mechanics of this philosophy further and see how to practically apply it to your own life, the UFM provides an incredible starting point.
It really does.
You can dive much deeper into all of these concepts, tools, and the broader community by visiting soulrecoveryhub.learnworlds.com. It is an absolute treasure trove for understanding how to rebuild that connection.
It reminds us that no matter how far unplugged you feel, the grid is always there, waiting for you to reconnect. The molecules in your body are constantly renewing, giving you a fresh opportunity for stewardship every single day.
I love that. So as we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over long after the audio stops. We started this conversation talking about ownership and the comfort we find in holding a permanent title deed. But we've discovered that everything you hold dear is essentially on a temporary cosmic lease. So if every single ancient molecule currently residing in your body and every passing second of your time is just on loan from the universe, what kind of return on investment are you giving the universe today?